Hoi hoi folks, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name's Sean, aka Uncle Frogface, and welcome to today's video. It's another polymer clay day today, but unlike before where I've made kind of small props and items and things, we're going to be doing something a little bit different. So I thought I would push myself, inspired by one of my favourite content creators on YouTube, which is Ace of Clay, and inspired of course by my favourite movie of all time, which is of course The Nightmare Before Christmas. I've decided to do a full character sculpt, and the character that I've chosen today is not one of the main characters, it's one of the side characters, one of the inhabitants of Halloween Town. That's right, today I'm going to be doing a full character sculpt of the Cyclops mummy child. So, wish me luck, and let's get right into it. So we're going to start right at the very bottom of this sculpt with a base. So I know people like Ace of Clay would use a wooden base for this, but I couldn't find any online. So I'm improvising with a bit of corrugated cardboard. I'm just cutting out a 3-inch square. So I'm going to use 1, 2, 3, 4 of those. And then I can just tape a bit of tape and stick them all together, and that will give me a nice bit of thickness for a base. So obviously we know aluminum or tin or aluminium foil, whatever you want to call it, and wires and things can all be used for armatures, but cardboard is also a really good armature base, particularly for kind of structures and things like that. So I just wanted to build up a little bit of a lip on the edge of this base, so again just a little bit more cardboard and a little bit more tape. Lovely. Now that I'm happy with that, I'm using Super Sculpey medium, and I've got some pre-conditioned here, and I'm just going to measure out what I have, and this is just some polymer clay glue, some bacon bond. I'm going to cut out the corners here and then fold up the edges, and you'll see that that gives us a nice kind of completely coated base at the bottom. I'm just going to leave the cardboard inside, no one else is going to see it, so that's absolutely fine. So once that's all kind of stuck down, I'm just going to pinch the edges together so that they stick nicely, blend them in, and then it's time to work on the top. So I had a little bit of a think about this before I started, and I had a look at the scenery of Halloween Town, and it's all very kind of textured, nothing's very even, there are no real straight lines either, so I thought the first thing I would do is just build up a very textured base. So I'm just cutting my, my clay slab into these little pieces and gluing them down all over. And once I've done that and it's completely covered, I'm coming in with a little bit of baby oil to soften the clay. And once that's all painted all over, it goes nice and shiny. I'm just using a small spoon tool and kind of blending the edges together. So I want to keep as much texture as I can, but make sure it is one solid piece of clay. You see, it kind of gives it a nice stone texture. There we go. And once I have that, I've decided that I want this to have like a curb around the edge of it with a bit of pavement in the middle. So I'm just going around and laying in some kind of stones around the edge of the whole base. And making sure that goes down the edges of it as well to give it a full 3D look. Lovely, and now to the kind of pavement in the middle. Like I said, no straight lines. So I'm going nice and wavy and then putting my brick pattern in between there. And off camera I do also poke a couple of holes in there. So whilst that's baking in the oven, it's time to make the armature for our character. So I roughly measured out how tall I wanted it to be using one of my tools, and it's just a piece of aluminium wire and some tin foil. So this character has a kind of eggplant shape. It's kind of much fatter at the bottom, skinny at the top, and then it has this round head at the top. So I'm just really using this as a way to sculpt the skeleton underneath. I'm going to be measuring out how long I want the arms here, which is actually too long, and I trim them down later. But it's good just to get them in place. I've got this little skinny neck, these little shoulders, and then the little skinny arms. And this character has quite a low bottom and tiny little legs. So we're just going to get that all in place now with the tin foil. Okay, so these are the holes that I pre-poked, and this is all now baked and hard. And you can see how I want that character to stand in there. So I used the same wire to poke those holes so it would all fit nicely. And now, really, we are applying a skin to the main part of the body. So not too worried about the arms or the legs here, we'll come back to those later. So I've got all of those little slabs of pre-rolled polymer clay at the top there, and I'm just going over and kind of giving a skin to the whole body, blending it in so it's nice and smooth. I'm using the back of my spoon tool there because it's a nice rounded surface, and a nice round surface gives a smooth finish over polymer clay. Glides very nicely. And you can see the character starts to come together when you start to put the skin on. And we're just going to do the same for the neck and then for the head as well. Blending all the time. Lovely. So with his whole skin, we're now going to work on the legs and arms. So I've rolled out this long snake of clay, I've cut the length that I want, and then made an incision down the middle so that we can easily put it over the wire. And then again, we just blend everything in. So I'm just using my fingernail there to kind of get it to the length that I want. So they're both the same length. And then again, using the back of the spoon tool to smooth that all in. And then again, lovely in shot there. We're doing exactly the same thing for the arms. So get the length that we want, cut an incision down it, and then smooth it all in. Very long noodly arms. Okay, so now that we've got our base baked and we've got our character all covered in clay, it's time to pose him. So at this point, I actually glued him down to the base, and then later I removed him and then put him back because it was just a little bit too unwieldy to kind of do the rest of the sculpture. There you go, I've put him in a kind of little waving pose. With something nice and neutral, and he's got these little tiny feet, so again just gluing those on and blending those in. It's just little kind of fat triangles. There we go, nicely smoothed in. Okay, so here I'm just taking a medium ball stylus and making the indent for his eye socket. And just taking, after applying a little bit of bacon bond, that's just a small ball of clay. And then these characters don't have irises. Well, they have pupils, but they're not kind of on top. They're just little poked in holes. And then this is the only piece of bandage work which is kind of stuck on to the main body, so around the eye, because I wanted to give that kind of eyelid effect with the bandages. And once that's all blended at the back, I'm just coming in with an explorer tool and creating these kind of lots of uneven ridges and circles where the bandages are all kind of looped around the character. And once I'm happy with what I've done on the head here, I'm going to go ahead and do that for the rest of the main body, leaving out the arms and legs. But you can see I'm kind of experimenting with a few things, but actually just the explorer tool gives a really nice effect. You can see there I've gone right over the whole body. So here is my top tip for creating lines around body parts like this. Just a piece of thread looped around and just gently tug, and you get these nice clean lines around the body, and it really does look like fabric wrapped around. And you can do these as close together or as spaced apart as you want. but this is how I got the kind of the ridge lines for the bandages on the arms and the legs. So we have to do these hands. He has tiny little hands with a tiny little thumb. And actually that thumb's a bit too big, so I come in afterwards with a knife and just shave that down. You can see there, I'm just making a little indent for those fingers. Very, very simple hands. Okay, and that's one hand, and I'm going to do the same to the other hand, just in a slightly different position. There we go. And then finally, final piece of sculpting is just these loose pieces of bandages. So I just tore off small pieces of clay so it gave a nice raggedy edge, and then I'm just blending them into the rest of the body. And here he is, fully baked and cooled. Okay, so that's the sculpting part done. Let's get into painting. So this is just a slightly watered down black matte acrylic paint. Matte paint is really the best for these types of sculptures and anything with polymer clay. Glossy tends to reflect the light a little bit too much, be a bit harsh, but I watered this down just a little bit because I want this to go into all of the nooks and crannies, all of those creases and crevices, and we're just going to go over and paint the whole character. Because this is slightly watered down and it's cheap acrylic paint, I'm actually giving this a couple of coats, and between coats I'm hitting it with a hairdryer just to make sure the drying goes a lot quicker than if I left it. So there we go, all painted black, and I've got a lot of muted colours. So the whole of Halloween Town is really muted. There are a few little pops of colour, and this character does have a single pop of colour, but the rest of it is very muted. So I've got this light brown muted colour that I've got here, and I started with a grey and then added some brown to that. I'm coming in and giving that a bit of a coat, highlighting a few of the bricks, and I'll let that dry and then come back with some darker paint afterwards. There we go, that was a bit of a transition there, and we're just going to highlight a few more of the bricks, darken up the whole base. And you can see how the black paint stays in those crevices. We're not using this paint very thickly, so it's not going to go into those all of those creases, and that gives us a little bit of texture. Okay, and once that's dry, it's on to the mummy himself. So I'm going over, so this is again a grey, and I've used some yellow ochre, just a small amount of yellow ochre, and I've got a slightly darker grey with a touch of yellow ochre, and then a lighter grey with some yellow ochre. I'm using the darker first just to go over and give a kind of base coat of this whole colour. I'm going over a few times of this. I want to use the paint quite sparingly because I want all of those details to stand out. So that means that I'm going to go over and do several coats just so that I've got a nice even base. A bit of texture is fine because he is, you know, made of cloth after all of those bandages, but I still want it to be a nice even coat. See that as it's drying, it's becoming a little bit translucent, which is why those extra coats are all important. So as I said, this is my absolute favourite movie, and I definitely want to do some other characters. But if you've got other suggestions for different characters you'd like to see, definitely drop a comment down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts and hear your suggestions. So you can see I'm cutting in around the eye and that bandage. So around the eye and between the bandages is actually all black. So I'm going to leave that as is. We'll get that top part of the bandage, get a nice straight line, and then the eye itself I'm also going to paint in this colour just to lighten it up. Because we're going to be painting that a light colour afterwards. So the lighter we can get that base for it now, the more that light pop of colour will really shine through, and the less coats we'll have to do of that. Okay, so once that whole base coat has dried, I'm coming in with the lighter kind of tanned, textured colour for the bandages, and I'm thinking about if this character were lit from above and just in front, where would the light hit and where would the shadows be? So I'm trying to pick out all of the highlighted areas here. If you do that to a three-dimensional sculpt, it just gives a little bit of extra dimension. I mean, you can skip this step and you would still have an amazing sculpture, but if you do this, it just makes it gives it that little pop, that little bit extra. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm first going in and picking out some of the highlights, particularly on the top of the head, the front of the chest and the belly, tops of the arms, tops of the legs as well, the thighs, they would be in light. So I'm thinking about all of those kinds of areas and picking those out. And because again I know that the eye is going to be a light colour, I'm going to paint the eye in this lighter colour as well, give it another coat. There we go, tops of the feet as well, they're going to catch some light. There we go, just making that eye really stand out. Okay, so we have done highlights, now we're going to do shadows. So this is grey, watered down with a little bit of viridian hue, just to give a bit of a colour variation, so a bit of greenness. And I'm just coming in, I'm kind of washing over so that this does sit into creaks and crevices, and I'm just lightly tapping away so we get a little bit of a hue shift, but it also stays within those kind of creases and nooks and crannies as well. And again, this step is optional, but it just gives a little bit of extra detail and extra dimension to the sculpts that you do. We're on to the final bit of painting. Here is the little pop of colour, is his bright yellow eye. So because we did all of that preparatory work, painting the eye gradually lighter and lighter colours, it means that this needed just one coat to get a really nice, even and vibrant colour. Okay, are you ready? Da 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 da. Look at him! I love him! He's so cute! This is my first ever full character sculpt. I'm so pleased with him. He is going to live on my desk now. I'll post a picture at the end of him just chilling on my desk. Yeah, I'm so in love with this. I'm definitely going to be doing more character sculpts like this. If you've got any suggestions of what you'd like to see, then please leave a comment down below. But until next time, as always, it's been great to have you here, and goodbye.